Hey, and welcome to our Passion Week series, day 2, Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. Day 1, we kicked off looking at Monday. This is 3 events following the Palm Sunday. So what we're trying to do is walk through the text to see what Jesus was doing each day to help us understand more of what was going on in Jerusalem, in Jesus' life, and the followers around him, to put ourselves there. We don't do that probably enough. This is Passion Week. This is Holy Week. This is leading into Easter. But let's understand Easter and celebrate it better by understanding what led to it. Now, today, Tuesday, day 2, leads us into a lot of things Jesus was doing as Tuesday and Wednesday kind of bleed together a little bit. But what we do know is that Jesus began teaching in the temple much more during this period of time. In his teaching, Matthew chapter 21 specifically, about halfway through, as he is teaching, the high priest comes to him and says, "What authority do you have to teach? What authority of what you're saying do you come in?" So they begin this conversation, and Jesus asked about John the Baptist. Who was he? Who sent him? The high priest didn't know how to answer him, because no matter the answer it was going to be, it would be something that one side or the other would not be pleased with. So he doesn't answer Jesus in a direct manner. And so Jesus says, basically, "I'm not going to answer you, but I'll give you this parable." So he begins to tell the high priest and those leaders around 3 stories. There's the story of the 2 sons, there's the story of the evil farmer, and there's the story of the son's wedding. In story 2, the parable 2, Jesus begins that story by once again bringing up John the Baptist and says very directly that you did not receive John the Baptist, but yet the horrible sinners did. You rejected him, they accepted him, they repented, or they accepted and believed in what he was preaching. Then he goes into this evil farmer parable. This was important to me as I think about understanding the authority dynamic. In short, and this is around verse 33 of Matthew 21, you see the story of the owner of the farm or field or vineyard has to go away to another area, another distant place. And so when it becomes time for the crops or the fruit to come in off that vineyard, he sends servants to get the share from the person caretaking this land. The caretaker beats and stones the servants and sends back those he didn't kill to report, and thinking he has got this field to himself now. But the owner sends back another group of servants, and basically the same thing happens. At the end of the story, the parable, the owner says, "You know what, I'm going to send my son. Surely they'll show honor and respect to my son," right? The caretaker kills him and says, "Surely now, since there's no heirs, it will be ours." Jesus lets them know that that's him, is what he's doing, and he's affirming that his authority is different even than John the Baptist and other prophets, as many believe Jesus was, as they earlier in early chapters, that's how the disciples described Jesus, as what other people believed as a prophet. Jesus clarified that there have been prophets sent. There's these other servants, but you've rejected. Some you've killed, some you've beaten. But the Son is now here, essentially, is what he's saying, and you're going to kill him too. This is important to establish a clarity of Jesus' authority. Jesus was not coming as simply a prophet. Many today will allow us to believe in Jesus as a prophet. Jesus was not merely a prophet. He is the Son of God, sent by God, his only begotten Son. John 3:16, we learn as children, and that is who he is. That is why he was able to do what we celebrate on Easter. And while most of us watching this have no issue with that, that absolutely is a core principle of what the Easter history story tells us, is that Jesus is the Son of God, and that was the only reason he could give his life. Now, this did not sit well with them, because he goes on and lets them know, as he has been rejected as that building block, that building block now will become the cornerstone because it's been rejected. And none of this sits well with those religious leaders. And so you see the tension begin to shift and build at this point in there. And if you follow Matthew 21 and 22, you begin to see this. Now, there's some other great things in particularly Matthew 22, some great things that you know specifically when the Sadducee tries to set Jesus up, or the religious lawyer, and try to trick him into a question about which is the greatest commandment. Jesus answers back in the great commandment, and you know that beautiful story. But let me leave you this last one point. In Matthew 23, Jesus goes into a fairly lengthy rebuke of the religious leaders. The entire 39 verses is judgment against them. And you can read it all again. That's Matthew 23. But I want you to see this tone that is beginning to shift as he is calling out the religious leaders. Terminology like the blind guides. There's this direct statement of selfishness, we would call it today, and pride and a lack of humility. And I mean, he's pouring it on pretty thick and calling them out. And he even tells those that are listening, because there's other people listening. There's a crowd, it says, around, along with his disciples. And Jesus says to the crowd, hey, listen to what these religious leaders say. Obey what they tell you. Follow your leaders. Do what the law says. But hang on a minute. Don't follow their example, because they don't follow what they teach. Man, that had to sting. And you can see this division building and tension building up in Jerusalem and the religious circles with the high priest. But I want to give us this closing verse or two to encourage us on how we can respond even today. In verse 23, Jesus, continuing to these religious leaders, says, what sorrow awaits you, religious law, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, he calls them, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the most important aspects of the law. Law is foundational to them, but he says what you're saying you don't do. And he gives them three things they were not doing. They're great to tithe the tiniest part, but you do not honor the law in justice, mercy, and faith. Justice, mercy, and faith. Yes, you should tithe, but do not neglect the more important things. This is a great reminder for us that in the midst of all that we're doing, you should tithe. That's great. We thank you as a church family, to whatever, whoever's listening, wherever you tithe and are faithful in that. We should. Jesus says we should there. But notice what he says. That's important, but don't do just the easy checkbox. I paid my tithes. I attended church when I'm able to. But he says, be careful that you do not forget the more important things: justice, mercy, and faith. Those are exercised to God, but God doesn't need our mercy. We need to give it to others. Isn't that right? God doesn't need us to give him justice, but to show justice to others and have faith in everything we do. I hope today somehow blessed you and encouraged you, and hope begin to give you a framework of what Holy Week or Passion Week is about. Join us tomorrow for day 3 of Passion Week, the series. God bless you and have a great day.